Heyo everybody, Zian over here from Nintendo Life, and today I'm bringing you a theory, a hypothetical situation that I've been thinking about for the past 24, 48 hours. This is all just speculation, my hopes and dreams, but hear me out. So as many of you know, basically the Nintendo Switch has become sort of a port machine for all of the great games that the Wii U had. Nintendo released a lot of solid titles on there, and it makes sense that they'd want to kind of roll those over into the Switch, as it is selling way better than the Wii U ever did. There are still quite a few titles that we want from the Wii U over on Switch, but I won't go into that. We already have a video all about that topic. Now the Nintendo 3DS, on the other hand, we've barely seen any ports from that system over to the Switch. Now we can consider that a good thing, because that means realistically we should be seeing more new games on the Switch, but so many of us have already played so many of those games, and they're still readily available on the 3DS and on the 3DS's eShop. But just take a second and dream with us, and think about Metroid Samus Returns, or The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds on Switch. How glorious and just buttery smooth it would look. It's an extremely appetizing thought. Now, something that caught my attention in Nintendo's recent Direct is the fact that they're bringing Miitopia, a game from the 3DS, over to the Switch. And not just porting it over just loosely, it looks beautiful. And Miitopia isn't a game that we should be talking about its graphics for either. And that had me thinking about it more, and so I discussed it with the team a little bit, and we realized that we haven't seen many 3DS games come to Switch at all. You could consider Sushi Striker, as it seemed like that game was more designed for 3DS, and maybe at a later date in production they decided to put it on Switch. Some of the DLC content from Hyrule Warriors Legends made it over to the Switch version, but I believe a lot of that content was also included as DLC that you could purchase for Hyrule Warriors on Wii U. It was also announced that Detective Pikachu is going to be receiving a remake on Switch at some point, but we've yet to see anything about that. And we're strictly talking about Nintendo themselves. There are plenty of third-party developers that have brought their 3DS games over to Switch, but Nintendo seems almost like they've entirely forgotten about their 3DS catalog. But the most exciting thing about that Miitopia announcement is not even just the fact that Miitopia is coming back, that it's getting a second chance at life, but that it's such a strange game to bring back. And why would Nintendo choose Miitopia over tons of other potential games that they could pick from that they've created on 3DS? And by looking at the graphical style and the backgrounds, it sort of reminded me a little bit of the design and direction of Link's Awakening, and it had me thinking, is this made by Grezzo? And I didn't do any research myself, but thanks to a few of our readers and followers, they actually reached out to me on Twitter and in our comments and stated, yeah, it is made by Grezzo. Miitopia is, at least this new remake. If you're unaware who Grezzo is, they've spent the majority of their relationship with Nintendo as developers porting classic games to 3DS and Switch. They're the team behind the Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask 3D ports. They also did Luigi's Mansion on 3DS. They also developed Ever Oasis, which was a 3DS RPG directed by the creator of Secret of Mana, and unfortunately it came out super late in the 3DS's life, so it flopped on the retail end. And of course, as I slightly mentioned before, they also developed the Link's Awakening remake on Switch. Now, if Nintendo is willing to put resources, time, and money into a simple-ish game like Miitopia on Switch and make it a full-fledged release, we have to imagine that Grezzo or other teams are working on other projects, or maybe they're using Miitopia as a test just to see how easy it potentially could be to port more of their games over to Switch before they tackle something larger like The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask 3D. And with this year being the 35th anniversary of the Legend of Zelda series, we're expecting to get an entirely Zelda-themed Direct at some point this year. Of course, the anniversary for Mario still isn't over yet because we're still in the month of February, so Nintendo probably didn't want to announce too many Zelda things in this Direct. I could very much see that, and maybe they're going to hold this back until Mario is over, but of course, that's just wishful thinking. If I were a betting man, I would have put money on Metroid Prime Trilogy, having been released 2-3 years ago at the Game Awards. It should already be on Switch, and it isn't. So, take this with a grain of salt. But it's exciting nonetheless to see Nintendo revisiting 3DS games on Switch, and not just bringing them back over in some virtual console style fashion. They're revisiting Miitopia and giving it a brand new coat of paint. It does kind of suck to see Miitopia retailing for $49.99, which is more than it sold for on the 3DS. So if Nintendo does decide to release more, hopefully they revisit that pricing structure, but regardless, we would love to see more 3DS games on the Switch. It's also worth mentioning that we recently reported that Grezzo is hiring staff for a new medieval and stylish game. The quote here is that it won't be photorealistic, but takes elements from reality and puts a design twist on them. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like Ocarina of Time 3D, Majora's Mask 3D, or really anything else in Nintendo's 3DS catalog. But that doesn't mean that they're not working on other things, because that also doesn't sound like Miitopia either, and bam, there it is. If you had the chance to bring 1, 2, 3 games max over to the 3DS, what would you pick? Are you a real advocate for Kid Icarus Uprising, or do you feel a little more Tomodachi Life? Or maybe you're a fan of Chibi Robo Ziplash. I see you. I know there's like 2 of you out there. Let us know what 3DS games you would pick in the comments down below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this, then why don't you repurpose that subscribe button for a new generation, so a ton of new people can experience it. And then ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we release new videos. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm ZM from Nintendo Life. Please, Nintendo, Grezzo, someone listen to this, and we will see you next time.